Welcome to the Healthy Home Show. And today our topic is how to detox. We are your hosts, Fernanda. I'm an architect.
Hi, I'm Eric Furman. I'm a healthy home contractor. And together we help people create healthy homes by reducing their exposure to toxins.
And today we're talking to Dr. Pompa. Welcome, Dr. Pompa.
Welcome.
I love this topic. Thank you for having me. We have a lot in common. We already just discovered that, didn't we, before we even started the interview?
Yeah, we should have recorded that as the interview.
Yeah.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
So let me get started by reading your biography, and then we're going to share with the audience why we chose you to be on this show. Dr. Daniel Pompa is a global health leader and innovator on a mission to educate practitioners and the public on the origins of inflammation-driven diseases, cellular detoxification, fasting strategies, and diet variation principles. Although trained as a chiropractor, his authority comes from the victory within his own battle, having overcome neurotoxic illness that was rooted in heavy metal poisoning. Dr. Pompa is the host of Cellular Healing TV and the author of the books Beyond Fasting and the Cellular Healing Diet.
So we've been following you, almost stalking you for you and your journey for a long time now. Your information that you shared on YouTube, you spoke about maybe like 8 years ago. Not sure when you originally posted it, but that was instrumental in really catapulting us towards health in our own home. And then all the other information you've been sharing over the years is just helping us build piece by piece and creating and maintaining a healthy home for ourselves.
Yeah, and just like you, once I became ill from being exposed to environmental toxins, it was very hard to find the cause of it, to treat, and actually to detox from it. And that's when I think your knowledge is very important to our audience that's going through this mysterious illness that they can never find the cause. And when they do, they don't know what to do with it, especially with all the misinformation out there.
Yeah, that was my life. I mean, I all of a sudden, 1999, 2000, just all of a sudden fatigue. And then it went to debilitating anxiety, insomnia, panic attacks, allergic to every food I ate. Couldn't adapt even to any stress, even loud noise. My wife would have to take the kids out of the house. I mean, that became my reality. And I didn't know what was wrong for many years. I was losing my life very rapidly as I knew it. And what's funny is if you would have asked me if I was healthy a week before those symptoms started, I would have said, absolutely. And all of a sudden my bottom fell out. Some people are kind of sick their whole life and get more sick as they go on. Other people's the bottom falls out. That was me. I definitely just was smacked in the face with this. I had what I call a perfect storm reaction, where I had a chemical stress, another chemical stress. So it was a moldy home. As it turned out, I had mercury just vaporizing off silver fillings into my brain, and I was wearing contact lenses at the time, which contained mercury in the saline solution, oddly. Well, that wasn't true at that time because it was 70s, 80s, and early 90s. In the early 90s, it was outlawed. But for years, I put it in my brain. And the silver fillings, 50% mercury vaporizing in my brain, was in a mold exposure, probably low grade. If I didn't have the mercury, the mold probably wouldn't have hit me as quickly. Mold's bad for everybody. But see, it's this perfect storm that hits us. Stressor, third stressor, boom. Catastrophic storm. That's what they call perfect storm, if you remember the movie with George Clooney. So 3 weather fronts come together and you have a catastrophic storm, devastating. Well, when that happens in our life, when we have silver fillings vaporizing mercury, who knows what other sources you have. And then maybe you have an emotional stress and you're already living in a moldy home. Bam. Genes are triggered. Now you're sick unexplainably, don't know the answer. So when I was looking at what was going on, it took me a while. It took me, 4 years of just to figure out that it was, I got these 2 silver fillings removed. And that's shortly after that is when the symptoms started. The only reason I even knew to track it back to them, because I read a very bright endocrinologist book. My adrenals were shot. My thyroid was not working, but my blood work was normal. he said to me one day, "Dad, I think you have mercury toxicity." And I said, "Yeah, I think I thought so too, but it was about a year before. I found Mad Hatter's disease online. And it's basically people making felt hats were using mercury. And they were known as Mad Hatters. So I had every symptom as a Mad Hatter. So I went and got a blood test and it was negative. So I was devastated. So a year later, he tells me, I think you have mercury poisoning. I'm like, oh, I thought so too. He's like, well, that blood test would only have been positive if you had acute mercury poisoning, meaning poisoned every day. Do a challenge test. And I did. And I could see, I was holding metals like crazy, not just mercury. But the fact is then I, of course, asked the question, where did this happen, you think? Did you have any dental work done when this happened? And that's how I traced it back to that time. But the bottom line is this. Once I realized the source, I had to get them removed correctly. So don't just go get these removed. And then I had to, I researched like crazy and learned the absolute disaster online when it comes to detox, which is today's subject, because it was unbelievable. Look, I was dyslexic as a child and couldn't read till 7th grade. However, it left me with this magical gift of being able to read things. And I still am a slow reader, but being able to read things and go, oh, I read that, 10 years ago, and so I'm really good at reading studies and I'm really good at remembering where information is. So out of the hard things, pain to purpose has been my whole life, if you really identify my life. But from that, I was able to really dig through the crap, if you will, of what's online about detox and learn to get this inorganic mercury that comes off the fillings out of my brain. And so I realized I had mold sensitivities. I'd feel normal and I'd walk into a moldy building and be sick again. And so I realized, my gosh, it's like that was part of my story too, So, the perfect storm, I had to deal with all of it. To your benefit here, to salute you all for what you're doing, is rarely do I find people, practitioners that look upstream to people's homes, which is the first place I look. Second place, their mouth. And, that's where these hidden things are. Look behind the walls. But the fact is hidden infections, mold, and heavy metals are typically this perfect storm that make people sick. Then what I learned and taught for 20 years now is how do we get this stuff out of the body correctly? And that's what I do.
And that's, you mentioned some like very important topics, because I also did, when I got ill, I also did a lot of tests, blood tests, urine tests, and everything came back. Every single doctor that saw me, it was like, oh, you're totally normal. They even came up with the idea that I was trying to get attention and trying to,
I was told it was all in my head a few times. Believe me. And by the way, I had remembered when I went and get that blood test done, I went to Allegheny General Hospital, like head of toxicology. And he agreed I had mercury symptoms, but he ran that blood test mistake. Anyways, but I ran almost $5,000 worth of blood work that day, all of which came back normal. I looked like the healthiest guy on the planet. And yet I couldn't even work and deal with my, my kids or my family. I mean, so it was devastating. I started to think maybe I am crazy.
Yeah. And that's what I see a lot of people, that we just get used to feel sick. And we are blaming on stress or just blaming on, it's just normal because everybody feels that. So everybody feels normalized, but we all feel the same, which doesn't have to be the story. But you also mentioned something that it's very important, that how your process. And I love your 5 R's. If you could explain to the audience your 5 R's and how your process works, that would be very, very good.
Yeah, look, I mean, most detox is done wrong. So you go into a health food store or your practitioner's office, the 10-day cleanse, 21-day cleanse, you name them. Most of those are what I call poopers. They make you go to the bathroom more. I promise you, I did a lot of poopers. Sometimes it's needed. I'm not, if your bowels are backed up. But the point is that you're not going to get your life back by moving your bowels more. If it were only so simple. If it were only so simple to do a juice cleanse and get your life back, a liver cleanse, it's not. When you really learn what's going on, why you don't feel well. And I have a saying, you have to fix the cell to get well. And more specifically, you have to detox the cell to get well. And that's the problem is, look, our cells day in, day out have to detox, and that keeps you healthy. But when they stop that process, now toxins build up in the cells, and there goes your energy. There goes your brain. There goes your gut. There goes everything, right? So we have to upregulate what the cells should be doing day in, day out. And when we get bombarded with these types of neurotoxins that I mentioned earlier, it shuts down these pathways like that. So there was born my 5Rs. Actually, it was born on an airplane because I had just did a lecture to doctors about like, this is the problem. You know, the cell is doing this and we have to fix that. And I could tell they didn't get it. And I was very frustrated. And literally I prayed. This is a true story. And I prayed and I went about my business and it started coming to me. And I know when that happens, I grabbed a notebook and a pen and I literally started jotting down the ideas. And birth was the 5Rs. So I could tell you, I'm not smart enough to come up with this. You know, it was no doubt through what God designed. Honestly, through, you know, when I was sick, my wife, she's the faithful one of us. I mean, I'm more faithful now. But her gift is faith. Okay, I'll say it that way. Because I am a faithful guy, but her gift is faith. She literally was taking the brunt of my illness. And in her prayer time, God laid on her heart that not only is he going to get me well, but he's going to take a message through the world, through me to the world. And when she would tell me that, I didn't want to hear that at the time because I couldn't even get myself well. So all that was burden on me, and I would get mad at her. But I can say this, I am here today because of that, you know, that I didn't choose this, you know, God chose me to bring it. So I have to believe, I would never say I have all the answers, but, you know, what I discovered and what God showed me through this has got not just my life back and my family's. Honestly, we have a whole family story, but thousands of people around the world. So I'm grateful. And now I teach doctors all around the world these concepts. So the 5Rs is our number one, is you have to remove the source. And now we're talking the same language. That's how we got here. You know, meaning that if you have mold in your home, you're not going to get well until you deal with that. You know, you might get a little better here or there, but you're not going to get well. If I didn't get rid of these silver fillings that are in my head, vaporizing mercury for the life of the filling into my brain, turning to inorganic mercury in there, it's trapped until you do something about it. So even if you get your fillings out, it's still trapped there. You know, and matter of fact, where most of the mercury goes is the very area of the brain that controls all of your hormones. If you look at why you don't feel well, it's hormone dysregulation. I spent years chasing my adrenal issues, my thyroid issues, no go. I knew intuitively the problem was there, but I just didn't know, you know, what to do really. But when you look at studies on where this mercury accumulates, pituitary hypothalamus, that's what controls your thyroid, your adrenals. So, you know, we have to go after these sources, you know, and it just, I talked about the hidden infections. If you got a root canal, they hold anaerobic bacteria, which are deadly. I can't tell you how many people, you know, get their life back when these sources are found and removed correctly. Hidden infections in cavitations where wisdom teeth are removed. You need a cone beam, folks. That's a 3D X-ray that shows these areas of infection. Back when I was sick, we would just have to drill into these areas where wisdom teeth were removed, and like drywall. You know, you're a contractor, you know, if you drill into drywall and miss the stud, you fall through. That's what happens when you drill into a cavitation area. But that's how we would find these things. Now we actually have these 3D scans we can do. But the point is this: we have to get rid of these sources. You know, our number one. Our number two, this is not talked about in detox, but the cell membrane is the key of detox. I say it's the king of detox, you know. So in other words, I can just grab my little pen here. But if you look at a cell, you can see that, right? This membrane around every cell, maybe we have 100 trillion of these in our body. If this membrane is inflamed, by the way, the number one thing that inflames it is toxins. They make their way into this fatty membrane, and they come in and they come around that membrane and they inflame it. Now you can't get the good stuff in, you can't get the bad stuff out. Critical. Not to mention, where you make energy is the mitochondria. So this is where you make ATP. These mitochondria, there might be 100 or 1,000 of these in every cell. These membranes get inflamed because of toxins. If you don't fix that membrane, Now you can't detox the cell. Oh, by the way, that's R3, is restoring the cell energy. So if you don't restore the cell energy, you can't upregulate the cell's natural detox. And R4 is you have to reduce the inflammation. When this inflammation is caused by this, by the way, here are all your hormone receptors. So when you have thyroid hormone, as an example, it has to attach to that receptor, get its message in the cell, and then it tells you to burn and use fat for energy. It tells you to basically, be a fat burner when you're not eating, right? But if this receptor is blunted because of toxin-driven inflammation, I don't care how much thyroid hormone your doctor gives you, you're not going to feel well. You're not going to lose weight. You're not going to, you're going to be forced to break your diets, eat every, 5-6 meals a day because you can't use your own fat as energy, and your cells can only use sugar or fat. So the point I'm making, though, is that this is toxin-induced inflammation. So R4s, we have to reduce that inflammation. Some of my dietary strategies are important there. And the last R is R5, reestablishing something called methylation. As methylation drops in the cell, so does its ability to detox. This cell builds up with toxins. Now, in your nucleus of the cell is your DNA, right? These genes start getting turned on. Now, all of a sudden, you have weight loss resistance. Gene was turned on. Thyroid issue, gene was turned on. Diabetes, gene was turned on. So, yes, you can get the diseases of your genetic weakness. Your DNA is not your destiny, however. If you detox the cell, you have an ability then to turn off those genes. But you have to follow that 5 R's as I teach it to actually do that.
So what you talk about toxicity bucket, does that have to do we keep hearing this a lot, is this like toxic overload? Can you explain to us the toxicity bucket? I'm assuming has to do with overflowing.
I did an interview the other day and I still have this one drawn.
Okay, there we go. Perfect.
You just said. So someone else asked me the same darn question. Okay. First of all, I think this is, to your point, I think it's a great analogy, right? So if you look at our bodies as this toxic bucket, genetically, we have different size buckets, right? But if you're in a mold situation, silver fillings, I don't care what size bucket you have, it's overflowing one day. You just might last longer than the next guy. But you have to understand that it starts accumulating these toxins in utero. So this is an interesting fact. The number one source of lead toxicity is mom. During pregnancy, it's very normal to lose bone, but guess where you store your lead? In the bone. So out comes the lead. So I said my whole family was affected by this. My wife had extremely high lead levels that she got from her mother, who ended up dying of cancer. She never got to her source, but her hormones were disrupted because she wasn't able to get rid of toxic hormones, et cetera, et cetera. But my wife was heading down the exact same path, and her hormones were dysregulated, couldn't figure it out. R number 5, her methylation was tanked, which enabled her to not get rid of toxic hormones. So her toxic estrogen was through the roof, which causes breast cancer. That's where her mother started. So we were trying to help her methylation, but it wasn't raising. Her toxic hormones weren't going down. And then I discovered she had smoking high lead. So where did that come from? Her mother, who had high lead. Oh, so then my kids are born, and they start having GI issues despite all the healthy things that we did. What was going on? So I end up measuring their lead off the chart. Where'd they get it? Mom. It's estimated 4 generations you inherit the heavy metals. Oh, by the way, the DRAS study, ladies, the number of silver fillings that made me sick, and the number, you count them, in the DRAS study showed that number is proportional to how much mercury we find in the baby's brain. So the fact is you start accumulating that stuff right here in utero. And then maybe vaccinations, flu shots, which still contain mercury. I mean, every flu shot has mercury. And then a moldy building, bad air, because we're building homes. This is your neck of the woods. We're building homes airtight, absolutely more energy efficient. But we're bringing all of these flame retardant things from computers to furniture. I mean, all of this, is coming into our homes. Formaldehyde from,
chlorine,
everything, right? All of it. But the problem is, if the home breathed, all right, maybe you deal with it. but we're putting it in a box that doesn't breathe. So you start accumulating all of this till one day, boom, it overflows the bucket. That's when the bottom falls out. That's when you either start reaching for medications or supplements or whatever it is. But here's the thing. Imagine, if you had 2 glasses of water, one right at the level. Here's where most people are, right? You're kind of somewhere near the top from accumulating your lifetime, and a little bit of stress and you overflow, but it stops and you live your life that way. Oh, okay, the diet thing worked, or I am exercising now, I feel a little better. Oh, I took that, I feel a little better. And then you get another emotional stress, or maybe it's another chemical stress, and now you're spilling over again. Till one day it's just spilling over, right? But if we can empty that bucket down even to half, now when I stress that bucket, it doesn't spill, right? So we have to empty the bucket, but you have to empty 100 trillion little buckets, because that's your cells. So the bucket theory gives us an idea of how we accumulate this and what we need to do. But remember, it's still that perfect storm. These stressors come together. So I call it a stress bucket, meaning that physical, chemical, or emotional stuff fills it. And that perfect storm, boom, it overflows. Your genes get triggered.
So I have a quick question, or maybe not a quick question. So kind of like some things we experience, and you've already mentioned it took you a long time to research these things, obviously worked on these protocols. If you were to say at one point, maybe looking back, it's kind of hard when you go through this process, was there's this aha moment where it's like, okay, this is working? Or when did you start feeling better? Like what really made the difference for you? If you had to put,
when I first started doing detox cycles, and one of the things I teach is all detox has to be cycled, meaning 3 days on, 4 off, 7 on, 7 off, 3 on, 11 off. I mean, on and off cycles are a little different for everybody. And I always train my doctors that train the person to learn this process so they can actually do it long enough to matter. So in my process, we have a preparatory phase where we just kind of get the cell working a little bit, not detoxing, but upregulating some of the pathways. And then we have a body phase where we're just trying to get the easy to get toxins to set us up for the most important phase, and that's the brain phase. And that's where we have to get to these deep-rooted toxins that really is why you don't feel well. So it was probably, I remember in the body phase where I was just kind of clearing. Every once in a while I'd go, oh my gosh, I had these like days where I felt normal. They didn't last. But when I got to the brain phase, after about 6 months into the brain phase, I actually could start sleeping through some of my nights. A lot of that super anxiety was going away. And after a year, I could sleep through almost all my nights. So I want people to caution. That's one of my pet peeves with this whole thing is, oh, I did heavy metal detox, or I detoxed. Okay, this is it. I cleared metal out of my brain for 4 years. So that's why when I work with someone personally, and I still do, I do it virtually. So I help people all around the country with these unexplainable things. But I train them the process so they can actually do it long enough to make a difference. If you're not good, look, it took me 30 some years to bioaccumulate that mercury in my brain. There's no way you're getting rid of it in 6 months. No way. So therefore, the person has to learn the process. And it's different for everybody. The chelators that we use, the downstream support to keep your pathways open is different. The cycle lengths, the doses. Some people do better with higher doses, lower doses. So, that if you're very sick, you need a coach. I mean, that's why I'm training doctors, and it's probably why I still do it myself. But I love it. I do.
Yeah, I think that's one of the important things is that sometimes, and that was me, I was expecting something that would make a miracle, and I would feel better like in a week or two. After doing something, I would feel like, okay, now I know what it is. I'm going to detox. And I would love for you to talk about the cyto detox that you developed as a binder, because as I was looking into the internet and trying to find something to detox with, I found carbon. And then as I start looking into it, there's so much, charcoal. There was so much misinformation out there. So if you could talk about a little bit about your binder, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, when I explain to people what real detox is, step one is, I already explained it, you have to upregulate the cell function, right? That's where my 5 R's are. The second thing is is you have to make sure your downstream detox pathways stay open. It's really important. And again, that kind of support's a little different for everybody. But the third one is what you're talking about. You have to use real chelators and binders. Big mistake. So like most people, I went online and I was like, oh, cilantro is great to move mercury out of the brain. And it almost killed me, honestly. My wife literally, it took me 2 weeks to come down. She thought she was going to have to check me in. And I'm not just saying that. Literally, it was that bad. I did the Corellas, right? I mean, all the metal magnets, the NDA, I mean, all these things that are out there, and they're weak binders. You know, I'm not going to get into the science of how to identify a strong real binder, but some of them is a sulfur hydrogen group where you have to have 2 of these things. And if a product just has one, now it just pulls and it doesn't make it all the way out of the body, lets go and creates redistribution. Some just have a sulfur group, which pulls very weakly, but it pulls, but then it breaks off and now it recirculates only to go into the brain where it was better off in the body. You know, so there's all these herbals that have weak binders, ion binders. The fact is you have to use real binders. Now, that cytodetox. So if I keep working with my cell model here, I'll just work with the same picture. So if we get the cell detoxing, okay, many of the toxins end up going to the liver, which I'll talk about in a minute. I have to move over this way. Okay, so if we get the cell detoxing, let's say we upregulate these cell functions, right? The problem is the cell can start dumping toxins, and many of them can start redistributing. So the product you mentioned, it's CYTO detox. So Cyto Detox was a product that we developed over the years, and many brilliant scientists' hands were on that product. Honestly, I just knew what was needed in the process, and we kept evolving better and better products and looking for better and better binders and chelators. Cyto Detox came through prayer. I can honestly tell you that. There's a whole story there, but it has different size particles, some big that stay outside the cell to prevent redistribution from toxins going to the brain. Some of the particles are very small and have the ability to cross into the cell and into these membranes. And so having 2 different size particles in the product makes it the brilliant product, because we have to get these things out of the membrane. So the small particles help that escort, but the big particles prevent the redistribution. But ultimately, Cyto Detox acts as a vehicle to make sure you don't redistribute and brings it all the way out of the body. See, things like heavy metals and biotoxins from molds, these aren't normal toxins. So even something that your body has called glutathione to get rid of toxins, it does a good job of unloading them from the cell, but it doesn't do a good job bringing them all the way out of the body. So I was doing some glutathione IVs. I was wondering why I was out of my mind. And I learned that, unfortunately, later. If you do glutathione, you have to have these real strong binders around it. And then we realized, okay, many of the toxins end up in the liver, and then they bind up to bile, B-I-L-E. And bile is used to digest fat in your gut, in your intestines. So what happens is the toxins bind to this fatty complex bile. And then when your liver utilizes or dumps the bile to digest fat, when you eat fat, it brings the toxins with it. Here's the problem, is in the lower intestines, if I can draw a very quick gut intestine thing there. So the liver dumps the bile into the gut, but the problem is in the lower intestine, the body's designed to reabsorb the bile so it doesn't have to recreate it. So guess what it brings with it? The toxins.
Toxins.
Yeah, so that's called auto intoxication. So we developed another binder called Bind, B-I-N-D. Bind is 4 different binders in it, and it has the ability to hold on and not let go. So you move it all the way out of the body. So we use the Cyto Detox in and around the cell as we upregulate cell function. Then we use Bind here as a catcher's mitt. These binders don't leave the gut. They're too big. Here's the problem with binders. They're oftentimes very toxic themselves because they hold behind. Like you mentioned, carbon and charcoal. Most of them are polluted, or they're too weak. They don't matter. They're not charged enough. So, there's a whole lecture I do on real binders, but it is part of what real detox is.
Yeah, this is such a great information. because we had an opportunity to look at the whole process from the beginning, from exposure to, during the process and how to get rid of it, which is fantastic. And you have a question for Dr. Pompa, last question for him?
Yeah, so really any final words of wisdom, and maybe especially around, obviously this is a process that you need most likely professional guidance on, and it is a multifaceted process. There's no panacea, just take this magical pill, which I love because that's how everything in life is. So what can somebody do right now? Obviously the removal, but some simple steps of something in their home to look out for, and to start avoiding these toxins and clearing them from their life.
Yeah. Number one, R1, start by examining your history, your life, and look at those 3 that I mentioned that are typically missed, right? There's a lot of toxins that once these detox pathways are shut down, we start bioaccumulating, meaning holding on to in our body. But the 3 big ones, I call them the 3 evils, because they're so nasty that they shut down all of your detox pathways, your liver, your kidney, your gut, your cell pathways, and then you start accumulating everything. Now when you're doing laundry with regular laundry detergent, like this becomes a problem. You drink out of plastic, that becomes a problem, right? But the 3 evils, and I kind of brought them up already: heavy metals, exposures from mom, that's where it starts. Silver fillings like me, right? Added to it, contact lenses like me, right? And there's a lot of different exposures. Of course, eating fish today, especially bigger fish, is a risk, right? But the problem with heavy metals is most people do it wrong. You don't take those weak binders. It's not like that, right? So heavy metals, consider your sources. Mold testing, a lot about this. Get your house tested, right? Because you don't see mold, right? It's behind walls. It's something that just, it's there. You get used to the smell, perhaps. If your basement got wet a few times, it's mold, right? There's there. If you had a leak in your attic and you didn't dry it correctly, oh, there's mold there. So, and again, I'm not saying that that's even the thing that made you sick. It could be, but you won't get well until you get rid of all of these things. You won't get well until you get these silver fillings out. And you may have got sick by a mold exposure, but now you have fillings in. Now you're not going to get well because, see, they're neurotoxic. So you have to get rid of all these sources. And then a great test to start for yourself, if you might think, is mold an issue? Do a VCS test. You can go to V like Victor, C like Cat, S like Sam, test.com. $10 donation. It tests your visual contrast sensitivity. If you fail that test, there's a good chance you better have someone come in and look at your home, right? Otherwise, you're going to end up with a problem you're not going to solve. Lastly, I talked about hidden infections. Get a cone beam, CONEBEAM. Your dentist can write you a script for it. They're in every city in America. Caution, not every dentist knows how to read them. You have to have special software or even read them for cavitation. So if you go to my Cellular Healing TV, so my website is dr like doctor, pompa.com, drpompa.com. And if you go to Cellular Healing TV's my podcast, episode 279, I interviewed Dr. Jerry Curatola. We talked about all of that. And you can send him your cone beam. He does Skype interviews from all over the world. So anyway, but not interviews necessarily, but just appointments to read your cone beam for you. So there's an option for you right there. But the point is start there. Start there. And then obviously, look, once you get to a certain level of sickness, the perfect diet won't get you well. But I always say this, but you won't get well without the perfect diet. And whatever that is, because part of my lesson is diet variation. You have to get my book called Beyond Fasting, because that's something people can do too, is start some of the strategies in there. So I hope that helps. But if you go to my website under coaches, you can find a coach. And sometimes I'm able to take people on as well. But if you go to coaching services on my website, that'll help.
So quick question about your website as well. I was going to ask you earlier when you were mentioning these binders. Is that where people would find these as well as on your direct Dr. Daniel?
Yeah, you can find them on my website. I think you all have a link for the site of Detox. We'll put that up because I'm sure that you might have a code for them to get a discount on it. But Cellular detox, obviously, it has to be a part of what real detox is.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
so thank you so much. And Dr. Pompa has a gift for all of you listeners. It's a 90-day cellular healing diet meal plan, which I really need that myself. So thank you so much for gifting our audience with that. And all the links are going to be on the page with your website, and also going to put a link to the episode that you just mentioned on your Cellular Healing TV.
Ashley can get you that. I would just put the episode here because I mentioned it. So
yeah, so it's going to be easier for the listeners to go and find it. So thank you so much for all the wisdom that you shared with us. It was an absolutely pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.